My name's Jason Schuster. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I own Intricate Art Spine and Body Solutions. It's a continuing education company teaching other doctors how to do a couple things. This is a clip from our online Dry Needling 2 class, Dry Needling to Improve Men's and Women's Pelvic Health, the intricate interconnectivity of the jaw and the pelvic floor. This is a really cool one, you guys. This is a really neat subject. So the jaw and the pelvic floor are super duper connected in a bunch of different ways, and we're going to talk about them right now. One of the primary, most obvious connections between the jaw and the pelvic floor is the fact that both sets of muscles are heavily innervated by parasympathetic-dominant nerves. So the jaw primarily innervated by the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve has a bunch of different branches, and the mandibular branch, at least per neurophysiology books, you guys, the mandibular branch is considered to be the most parasympathetic branch of all the branches of the trigeminal nerve. So they're both the jaw muscles, parasympathetically innervated by the trigeminal nerve, the mandibular branch, and then the pelvic floor muscles, or all 9 of them, are innervated by some combination of S2 to S4, which is another parasympathetic dominant portion of our spinal column. So we're talking about both parasympathetic dominant parts of the spinal column. So the sympathetic chain is from like C7T1 to like L1, L2. The parasympathetic parts are down in the sacral plexus, S2 to S4, and up in the upper cervical spine because of the cranial nerves 5, 7, 9, and 10. So 5 would be the trigeminal nerve. Because both areas are so parasympathetically heavy innervated, they get the most disruption or the most inhibition secondary to sympathetic hyperactivity. So if picture this, the autonomic nervous system like a little seesaw. If this hand is the sympathetics and the sympathetics go up, the most parasympathetic muscles are going to be the muscles that are going to be the most inhibited or the most dysfunctional, and they're going to be the most obviously dysfunctional as far as actual symptoms go. So the muscles that are sitting farther down the parasympathetic end of the seesaw, like the muscles that are sitting right at the end in the seat, those are going to be the jaw muscles and the pelvic floor muscles, because when the sympathetics goes up, those get pushed down farthest into the dirt and they receive the most inhibition and the most dysfunction. And that's one of the primary reasons why you see so many impairments in both of these areas, either concomitantly at the same time, or you see one and then you see another one in the same person, or you just see one or the other. And they have lots of these start around mid-age, you guys, and it's not a coincidence. It just so happens that that is when human beings' nervous systems in general, because people don't take care of themselves, you just reach this level of complete energy deficiency where your energy demand is higher than your energy supply, and bad stuff starts to happen. So that's one of the easiest ways that we can fix the autonomic nervous system, is just restoring blood flow and oxygen to as many mitochondria as we can to improve energy. One of the best ways to do that is by needling the jaw and the pelvic floor muscles. Embryologically, the jaw and the pelvic floor also have similarities. So as far as like similar starting cell types, endoderm, ectoderm, mesoderm, all the pluripotent stem cells when we're first conceived, if you look at embryological studies, the first holes that you can see are the nostrils and the mouth and the urethra and the rectum, and they are right on top of each other, you guys. And then as the little baby starts to grow in the mom's belly, the head goes up this way and the butt goes down that way, and then we start to grow. But originally, both the jaw area from a cell origination standpoint and the pelvic area start very close to each other. So there's some other unique connection between the jaw and the pelvic floor. It could be something to do with like the idea of acupuncture meridians and energy lines, although I don't think acupuncture meridians exist how the acupuncturists think they do, but energy lines certainly exist in our body, you guys. If we didn't have energy lines, we would be dead. I can just tell you from clinical experience that needling the jaw and the pelvic floor is way, way better than just needling one or the other. If you're treating somebody with TMD, you have to treat the pelvic floor if you want to maximally regulate that person's chance of success through regulation of the autonomic nervous system. I treat the pelvic floor in 100% of my patients, you guys, and the jaw. regardless of if they have actual complaints there, because it's such an important area to treat that a lot of the time people have subconscious pathology where they don't like actively get bothered by it, but it's aggravated and it's a parasympathetic dominant portions of the autonomic nervous system, which allows us to induce more homeostasis than we would have otherwise. This is my favorite place in the jaw. If I had to pick one spot, and somebody said, Jason, you can just use one needle and you can only put it one place in the jaw, I'll go right through this hole. I'm not trying to hit that ganglion. My end goal is to get needles through that hole onto the tensor veli palatini muscle back there and all three pterygoids. But that is the closest, that little nerve bundle that's highlighted in blue there, you guys, that's the otic ganglion of the trigeminal nerve. If that is the closest bundle of trigeminal nerve that we can get a needle near, that's as close to the brain as we can get. So right, that back branch off of that otic ganglion, that goes right through the skull and to the brain. So if you get a needle in the vicinity of that ganglion, especially if you add electricity through the muscles, you get excellent changes in brain homeostasis, because one of the things that does seem to help with electrical dry needling is proximity to the brain itself. Like the suture lines in the skull, this area seem to have outsized positive effects on brain homeostasis. So this is a great way to calm down the trigeminal cervical complex, which we're going to talk about in a second, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and just the autonomic nervous system in general. Here's the trigeminal cervical complex. There's a bunch of different pictures of this, you guys. I chose these two pictures because they have the areas that I think are most important and they're relatively easy to look at. There's some more complicated pictures, but the left picture, the trigeminal cervical complex, so the very bottom black dot, the trigeminal cervical complex is labeled, that bottom black dot, that's the trigeminal cervical nucleus, which sits somewhere around C2 in the dorsal horn of our spinal column. That's like the bottom part of the trigeminal cervical complex. And then the rest of the complex goes up basically throughout our whole brain, up into the cortex. This picture doesn't have the cerebellum connection, but there is a cerebellum connection. But I think the most important connections in the trigeminal cervical complex are included in here. So you get the thalamus, the hypothalamus, obviously huge hormone producers and all sorts of other control areas. Two of the really important ones, you guys, underneath the thalamus and the hypothalamus, you got the PAG, which is the periaqueductal gray. So the PAG, at least in neurophysiology books, is considered to be like one of the primary neurosensory processing information centers that controls pain modification and pain sensation. So if the PAG is getting hyper stimuli or excessive stimulus, it's going to start regarding non-painful stimuli as painful. So things like allodynia, hyperalgesia are going to start to happen. So not good stuff. Below the PAG is the LC, the locus coeruleus, and that's the right picture is kind of amplified what some of the things the locus coeruleus does, you guys. The locus coeruleus is one of the primary epinephrine producers in the brain, and it controls a huge amount of things. If the trigeminal cervical complex is aggravated, which it gets aggravated if the jaw muscles and just the autonomic nervous system in general are aggravated, but specifically you can get stimulated in an aggravating way from chronic hypoxia and tightness of the jaw muscles. You end up having problems in the amygdala, the hippocampus, right? So emotional stuff, memories, the basal forebrain, wakefulness, in the hypothalamus, wakefulness, stress response, and neuroendocrine functions. The thalamus, sensory processing, wakefulness, stress detection, and pain modulation. The prefrontal cortex, right? Attention, behavioral flexibility, cognitive control. The midbrain, sensory cortices, the cerebellum, the spinal cord. So the locus coeruleus, if that thing is pissed off, which it gets pissed off if the trigeminal nerve is pissed off, causes all of that stuff to have a problem. And that's a big problem for you, right? So needling the jaw has a very, very homeostatic effect on all of these complexes and structures, which helps regulate the autonomic nervous system, which helps improve pelvic floor function. This is a muscle that nobody ever learns about in school. I was never taught about this muscle. It's the only muscle that we can treat, you guys, that attaches directly to the inner ear tube cartilage. So this is a little bit hard to visualize. I think I have a better picture in here in a second. This muscle goes from the top of the center of the soft palate over to the inner ear tube cartilage. There's 3 tensor veli muscles. We can only treat this one because you need a saw to get to the other one. So this one is the deepest muscle through that little frame, and there's no specific hole through that frame in there. If that muscle gets tight, it's going to pull both on the top of the soft palate and on the inner ear tube cartilage. So as far as muscles that can directly cause ear ringing, tinnitus, or anything, hearing loss, anything like that, that we can directly treat, the tensor veli palatini is it. It's super duper important to treat for not only hearing problems, but for all sorts of nervous system dysfunction, you guys. This helps regulate all 9 of the pelvic floor muscles. It helps calm down sympathetic hyperactivity, which helps depress chronic muscle tightness in the pelvic floor, not only in the jaw, but also in the pelvic floor. Tons of people feel immediate improvements in the pelvic floor because the jaw is such a strong parasympathetic area, and vice versa. When you're treating the pelvic floor, a lot of people will say, man, I feel that in my jaw, and it's because of the nervous system similarities. So there's no brain in that hole. As far as safety goes for needling in that hole, you guys, the biggest safety thing is don't use anything longer than a 40 millimeter needle. There's no brain in that hole. Theoretically, if you had some mind-bending powers, you could put a long needle in one side and come out the other. You wouldn't do any any damage to people. You'd just be going through like central things that you wouldn't really want to put a needle through. So that's why I just use like a 30 or 40 millimeter needle. If you really want to get a better idea, look at the inside corner of your patient's eye and just the outside of their face here, and that's about as long as you need. If you hit a bone in there, it's probably going to be this sphenoid bone. Not a big deal at all. I never feel inflammation on that bone, but I put 3 needles through that hole. I put one straight in, one towards the nose a little bit, and one towards the TMJ, and I'm just trying to put them in an arc so I get both pterygoids, both 2 lateral heads, the medial pterygoid and the tensor veli palatini. So not only does treating up here around that otic ganglion regulate the trigeminal cervical complex, it helps regulate the overall autonomic nervous system. So the sympathetic plexuses, all of our individual organ control centers, you guys, come off of the sympathetic chain. So by regulating and stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, we're depressing chronic sympathetic hyperactivity, which allows things like the sympathetic chain, our organ systems, and all that other stuff also to function better. So we need proper regulation and information going from the sympathetic chain to the brain and from the vagus nerve to the organs to the brain and the other way around to have optimal homeostasis. And we can accomplish that by treating areas that have the most overall effect of regulating the nervous system in the direction that we need to go, which is parasympathetic dominance compared to baseline. And remember, the vagus nerve is 80% afferent. So most of the vagus nerve's job is telling the brain what's going on with the organs. So then the brain can send the proper regulating signals back to the organs. So if the brain's not receiving proper information about the organs, it can't possibly send the proper regulating information. And that happens when the vagus nerve gets inhibited from the sympathetics going up, nerve conduction velocity gets messed up, communication gets fouled up. There's a whole bunch of ways that things communicate that we don't yet understand, but the overall result is bad. And by regulating the nervous system, by needling things like the jaw, we can help all that stuff improve. Here's just a quick picture of the celiac and hypogastric plexus, you guys. Needling the jaw is very, very helpful at regulating irritable bowel syndrome, stuff with like constipation, things like that. Because it's such a parasympathetic dominant area, stimulating the parasympathetics really helps the gut and the organs and the intestines, since they have such parasympathetic dominant innervation from the vagus nerve side, and that's the side that's getting inhibited. Like we talked about, there's the sympathetic chain going down the lumbar spine. It's typically thought about from the first rib to L1, L2, When we're talking about the jaw, we're talking about the parasympathetic dominant portion of that same chain up here in the upper cervical in the jaw and down here in the sacrum. I included this, you guys, because mechanically speaking, it's very, very easy for both of these areas to have pathology together. So if you're looking at the left picture here, that's just two muscles. That's the upper trap and the lat, and I have one of the omohyoid connected in there. With those three muscles, you get actual connection from the pelvis to the jaw. So it's not a big stretch. Or the platysma, the pecs, and the abdominals there, that's jaw to pelvic floor. And then the right picture is just another way to look at it. That's the little omohyoid muscle coming off, going into the upper trap. That upper trap goes into the lat attaches to the sacrum, right? So neurologically speaking, very similar. Mechanically speaking, very easy for both to get messed up together, and they often do. That's why we need to think about treating these two areas together. Thanks for watching, you guys. If you like this clip, keep an eye on my channel. I'm going to keep putting clips from both of our online dry needling classes. This was a clip from our online dry needling 2 class, Dry Needling to Improve Men's and Women's Pelvic Health. Check it out on our website, intricateartseminars.com, or check out our school channel, school.com/CEU, SKOOL.com/CEU, to get a big discount on our dry needling bundle. It's a bundle of both of our online dry needling classes for a big discount.